They sent us a very threatening legal letter, and I knew we'd done nothing wrong.
You have to have controversy in your marketing.
He was crawling through his attic, running Ethernet cables to build his own baby monitor system because of how frustrated he was with his system.
So I was like, man, I'm just going to do it myself. Well, please, let's build a better system.
My caution here is,
all right, guys, welcome back to Built in America. We are joined here by Kevin Lavelle, CEO and co-founder, and Charlie Hill, CPO and co-founder of Harbor. Guys, great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Sam.
thanks, Sam.
So, two dads, two entrepreneurs, changing the game of how men and women, fathers, mothers, monitor their babies. Why so?
Yeah, thanks again for the opportunity to share our story. Charlie and I are both dads of two young kids that are building the product that we wish that we'd had. The very short origin story here, when my son was born 8.5 years ago, I bought the leading baby monitor on the market, which is just a Wi-Fi camera with an app on your phone. I woke up one morning and the app had crashed, and I realized that apps on phones are not baby monitors. So we went out and bought an old school, one of those little, if you think about a baby monitor, tiny little screens, kind of old school cameras that you could rely on at night to alert you if you were monitoring your kid or not, which is what a baby monitor is supposed to do. And so I ran two systems in parallel for years. We kept a Wi-Fi camera and then used the old school device so that we could monitor our kid while we were sleeping at night, know if we were monitoring them, and then at the same time be able to use a Wi-Fi system to be able to check in on a babysitter or a nanny, just make sure that our kids are okay. Technology doesn't have to consume our lives, but it can really make our lives better. 8.5 years later, still no one has solved that problem of merging those two systems into one. And so with Harbor, we built a camera and a monitor that connect directly to each other with and without internet. So that means you have a dedicated fail-safe device. Here's a picture of our beautiful 10-inch monitor. It'll alert you if you're not connected. You can watch up to 4 different kids on that device. It works without the internet, so you can use it while you travel. And then everything has the benefits of Wi-Fi. So you can record, you can rewind, we have remote access, we have an app, all the things that Wi-Fi cameras do and so much more. And so that's the pitch on Harbor. But ultimately we built it because we were so frustrated with how terrible products are for parents. Everyone has a stroller they're obsessed with, or a car seat they're obsessed with, a formula brand, whatever. But people don't love their baby monitors. And it's a device that you use every day for 3 to 10 years, depending on how many kids you have. So very fortunate. Charlie and I met in 2022. And I have a background building a consumer brand. Charlie has a background building very complex software for hardware connected devices. It was a match made in heaven. And very humorously, when I first was introduced to Charlie, I called him and he was crawling through his attic, running Ethernet cables to build his own baby monitor system because of how frustrated he was with his system. Get out of here.
Yeah, on a similar story. We used, not the leader in the space, not trying to name names. It was kind of the second player in the space when it comes to an app-based camera. So you're relying on the app on your phone to monitor your child. Right off the bat, we're like, man, so I can't use my phone as a phone. I have to always know where my phone is. The app disconnects in the middle of the night, at least once a week. And so we're using a secondary system, a point-to-point system. Ours broke because they typically come with like little external antennas. And so the antennas broke off, bought a second one, antenna broke off again. It's like, oh my God, gotta figure this out. So my background is in IoT in very large scale buildings. And we also had integrations with security camera systems. So I was like, man, I'm just going to do it myself. So I was running Ethernet line through the attic, and same day spoke with Kevin, and all sweaty from that experience. Well, please, let's build a better system.
So two men come together, both fathers, thinking about how to build a better baby monitor. And you guys put this together now. It's been a few years since you guys started. Let's talk about day one to where we are today. So let's reverse engineer this. You guys come together, and then there's a hardware component, there's a software component, and there's a massive distribution component, right? Tell us day 1 to 30 of how you engineer this together.
Charlie, why don't you lead off on the product?
Sure. So we started, I think we received our initial funding in September, or October of 22.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, Kevin's pretty much the fundraiser. This is through his connections. It was a bit of a flyer check to get us to a prototype, to a proof of concept, which we did deliver in February and March of the next year. Kevin, do you want to talk about that investment cycle?
talk to us about how you raise money today for a product like this. I think a lot of people who want to build an MVP think, they have to either put their own cash in, they don't know what type of capital to go raise. It can be a large struggle. So if you can speak to this in the sense that there's a young entrepreneur out there that wants to start something similar in the hardware tech space, how would they go about it?
Yeah. Well, my caution here is if you've seen one company get to an MVP, you've seen one company get to an MVP because it's just different with so many different types of product. I spent a lot of 2022 trying to validate, could this be done and what would it take to get it done? So one of the big items for me in 22 was understand the path to get to that prototype. What sort of costs would I be looking at? What sort of vendors would I be looking at? And so condensing a lot of that, I got some very incorrect advice, which was we could go get off the shelf devices from China that we could just bang out a prototype real quick in, 60 days. I say it's incorrect advice because if you want to build a secure product, you don't want to buy electronics from China. And if you want to build something that has the capabilities for, very unique things, which is what we've done, you do have to do some level of custom design. I also got some really good advice, which was don't think that you are the most special snowflake in the world and that everything has to be custom. Try to do as much standard and off the shelf with an ODM as possible. And so kind of those two paths converged. And I had a pretty clear path of what it would take working with Charlie to be able to get to a prototype. So in short, we knew it would be somewhere around $1 million to $2 million to get to the phase where we could say, we have a prototype, we have manufacturers, we have validated what we need to do, and we have the path to go launch the product and raise a seed round. So with that, we had a pretty good sense of what we needed from a cash perspective and kind of beat up that budget and assumptions with some advisors. And our first check was written by Trust Ventures, a third fund venture capital firm out of Austin. And the reason that they invested was, first and foremost, I'd known them for many years. I had a very deep relationship with them. One of the partners there was an early investor in Mizzen and Main. So we saw how I built the brand and the company. But their thesis was, and a big part of what Harbor will be long-term, is expansion into remote patient monitoring, remote care. And they invest in highly regulated industries and knew that if we're really successful, that eventually regulation will hinder our ability to expand access to care and lower costs. And that's a big part of their thesis. So that was the first check. And we followed it up with some angels, some family offices, some friends and family to kind of join. And unfortunately, the advice I have there is do a really good job building a really good network and prove that you can execute on what you say you can execute. So a lot of the early investors from Mizzen and Main ended up backing Harbor. And that was a big part of how we were able to get started in what ultimately was the start of a VC winter. So just, very briefly on that, in early 22, VC was ripping and everyone that I talked to was like, with your background, you'll be able to raise $5 million on the PowerPoint. Like, no problem. And then Charlie and I met, we got our act together in the summer of 22. And by the time we hit the fundraising market, it had evaporated. So it really was those pre-existing relationships that I had that enabled us to get started. And so I'll turn it over to Charlie on kind of vendor selection and kind of some of the fortunate turns along the way.
Well, because I'm kind of like a third party on the fundraising perspective. So I from an outside viewpoint, I'd like to provide a little bit more color around that. So it was not the start of the VC winter. I think that was in full force at that point. So that was like the summer of 22. People were already saying VC's dead. And I think one thing unique about Kevin is he establishes this network and he never calls on them. So he'll have this huge network and he never asks for a favor. And so when he does, it's impactful. And that could be like 5 years into a relationship. So that's just one thing, like one tip there that I would say from a third party view, watching him work is establish that network, curate it. And that's something I struggle with. And don't call in favors until you absolutely need to. But I heard a fundraising story recently. I was at a kid's birthday party and it was somebody talking about in late 2021, the fundraising cycle they went through. And I was just like, oh my God, this is the most absurd story I've ever heard. I mean, it was like a deal brief memo, right? No PowerPoint, just an idea, no business model. And they were like, how big of a check do you want? And for what valuation? You name the price, right, to the founder. that was a conversation from big time VCs. It's like, imagine Kevin, whose previous business is doing 60 mil in revenue a year now. And with my background in IoT and connected devices, like trying to raise in late 2021, it would have been just a completely different story. Price setters as opposed to kind of what it was, which is a more rational investment cycle. But we started up in September. That was the fundraising cycle. In November, I pulled in my top engineer from my previous organization. So I pulled in my top two guys. So just got the band back together. And that's so from a product engineering standpoint, I get kind of similar stories. Like I had a network. I didn't call in favors. They said, "Hey, your next venture, I want a part of whatever you're doing." And so I said, "All right, guys, this is it. You said you wanted it, and this is it." And luckily, my lead engineer now, who was employee number one, was having a child at the exact same time, his first child, and so it was like perfect alignment. So we had a proof of concept going by December of that year, right? Because you just pull in folks that you know are going to be very high velocity on a product and engineering perspective. And by March, I think it was maybe late February, we were demoing the proof of concept in front of Trust Venture in Austin. And Brian, our lead investor, was poking holes. I mean, he was trying to break the system, and it was working. So I can actually show the prototype devices if you're interested later on, Sam. But it was very prototypey, but it worked.
And are you guys capitalizing on the reimbursement code for remote patient monitoring?
We will in time. Ultimately, we've started with the camera and the monitor, and we already are offering a service called a remote night nanny, where for as low as $25 to $35 a night, you can turn over the controls of your monitor to our professionally trained night nurses. And, in comparison, an in-home night nurse is going to be $300 to $700 a night for weeks or months on end. And so the idea is you can leverage our hardware and software to bring access and expertise to the masses anywhere with an internet connection, as opposed to needing to pay top dollar for in-person care, which is very difficult to find. And many people who can't afford it don't want someone in their house, or they can't find somebody that they actually trust. And so our vision is, and we're already helping families to build a remote patient monitoring capability on top of the distributed hardware that we have. And that was a big reason that investors ended up underwriting the deal, is creating a remote patient monitoring capability that truly no product exists today that could do what we do.
I'm going to share my screen for a second. People on YouTube can see this, but you guys call out, I assume, a competitor here. Yes, it is Harbor versus Nanit. Not many people will build a landing page or a website and actually have their competitor on there and call them out on the differences. But you guys decided to do so. And you guys talked about that you don't need internet. You don't need to rely on that to go use Harbor.
Yep.
Tell us why you're so different than all the other competitors out there today.
Yeah, I love having this conversation. And it's been a central part of our kind of early launch strategy, is that differentiation. I built a consumer business, and my experience with the failures of the leader in the market, which is Nanit, led me to starting a second business. My experience with the product was that bad. And after doing years of customer research and talking to parents, I just said, we can do this better. So ultimately, parents today have to choose between a Wi-Fi camera with an app on their phone, i.e. Nanit or Owlet, and there's some other smaller players, or some people just use a Google Nest or a Ring camera, or you have to choose one of these old school devices that doesn't connect to the internet, was built, 90s level hardware. As Charlie said, it's a piece of junk. It breaks all the time. And each of those modalities has a purpose. Each of them has a reason that it is helpful as a parent, but no one has ever merged those two systems together. One of the things that you put up there was traveling with a Nanit. Think again, because if you go to a hotel room and you have adjoining hotels, if you go to a hotel, you have adjoining hotel rooms, you can't connect your Nanit camera to a hotel Wi-Fi network. They will not allow you to do so. And so stories abound on Reddit and Twitter of parents getting to a long travel day. They get to their hotel room, they go to set up their baby monitor or their Nanit camera, and they have to run to Walmart to go buy an old school camera and monitor because they can't connect their Nanit. So ultimately, we built the product that solves for every need that a parent has in their baby monitor, which again, parents are going to use between 3 and 10 or more years, depending on how many kids they have. And that ability to do both of those things, you have a dedicated device that works with and without internet and alerts you if you lose connection. And also you have an app on your phone, you can record, you can rewind, you can check in on a babysitter, and you have all sorts of really unique AI capabilities that are possible now that were not possible 10 years ago. That is the easiest way to encapsulate it. But then we also put some really deep thought into, again, what is the experience for the user? So the camera, which I'm holding up for people who are not listening or people who are not watching, the camera has an AI chip in it and a memory chip in it. And the memory chip is important because that means all of your memories are stored on the device locally. We do not store your footage. We do not save your memories. So from a cybersecurity and from a reliability and a price perspective, we don't have to worry about where your footage is stored from a security perspective. And also, we don't have to charge you a subscription. Nanit and all these other devices are charging you subscriptions to access most of the features because they're storing terabytes of your footage on their cloud. And then the AI capabilities are such that even when you're traveling, our AI capabilities will work. They will alert you for the things that you want to be alerted on because it's all done on the device locally. And for those who aren't familiar, and Charlie can articulate this much better, think of it like a Tesla self-driving car in that all of the calculations and all of the decisions are done on the car. It's not like it's sending, is that a red light up to the cloud for all the obvious reasons. But the advancements that have happened in technology and the price coming down on these chips has made it possible for us to offer something that's just never been possible before.
Guys, hardware is hard. And that's an oxymoron, right?
Oh, I heard that 10,000 times. Yes.
And, building a product like this is not easy. And what I saw here is that your first, big moment at Mizzen and Main came from a Tim Ferriss podcast ad. And that probably creates some level of escape velocity. What has been the hockey stick growth for you guys at Harbor today?
I wouldn't say that we've hit escape velocity. And, the reality is we only started shipping products basically in Q4 of last year. So, we're here in Q2 of 25. What we're doing is working really well. We've shipped thousands and thousands of devices in just the first few months, which we're really proud of. But anyone who's built a consumer business or paid attention to or invested in early stage consumer brands, the first, 12 to 18 months are about tweaks in messaging and trying lots of different marketing avenues to find the things that are working better. Part of the reason that investors backed the two of us are Charlie's background in building exceptional products that have high reliability and cybersecurity requirements, and my ability to build a brand and differentiation in crowded markets. And so we've tested a lot of messaging. We have also done a good job so far of generating press. We're working with influencers. We've got a great social following. We have a really good digital marketing playbook. Our SEO is crushing it. We've got a great content library. So we're following a lot of the standard playbook that I ran before, and then testing some new verticals. And maybe a fun example of things that help us pop. We've run some very pointed ads calling out Nanit for their product failures. And it's the reason that we exist. And they sent us a very threatening legal letter. Basically, we're going to sue you out of existence. And I knew we'd done nothing wrong. We were entirely within the law and their claims were baseless. And so we sent them back a very pointed letter and sort of took apart their claims, claim by claim. And then I published their letter and our response on my personal blog. And so now when you Google Harbor Nanit, one of the first things that you see is Nanit failed my family. So we built Harbor and now Nanit is threatening to sue us. That's one of the first things from an SEO perspective. And so thank you again, Nanit, for feeling so threatened by an upstart. We're so grateful for your honoring our presence.
To chime in on that, I had the founder of Dirty Dough Cookies on the pod. Not sure if you guys know what that is, but it's a competitor of Crumble Cookies. When there was a massive lawsuit, very similar to what you just described. And he took virality around the lawsuit that Crumble was suing them for mocking their cookies, right? And he was using all the lawsuit content in a kosher way to create ads, do creatives, and he just took off like a rocket ship. And I think if you understand marketing today and consumers listen to this, you have to have controversy in your marketing. Either you have to be very much to the left or very much to the right. You get no praise for being the messy middle, right? So, my hat goes off to you for taking that approach and obviously creating some level of virality of what you guys are doing today, create sales through business. And I think that's the right way of looking at it.
I'll double click on that. Sort of, you've got to have, the way that I say it is you have to have some sharp elbows because people need to know what you stand for and who you are and why you exist. And being milquetoast is just, it's irrelevant. No one really cares. And I think this is one of the reasons why none of the baby monitor brands have really become beloved products, because none of them exist to help parents and kids get more sleep. They really are just they're just kind of there. They're not great products. They don't have a strong opinion. They're not there to actually be helpful. And so we have a ton of content on our website to help parents get through the very difficult phases of sleep and getting your kid to sleep through the night and then as toddlers. And the way that we position this is, you're the parent, you need to raise your kid. We cast no judgment and everyone's trying their best. But if you need help, which most parents do, and if you're asking for help, we have a very strong set of opinions on how you can help your child sleep through the night in a healthy way and why that is so important. And so many of these other brands, some of which we've talked about, when you look to see what's their point of view on sleep and how should you help your child sleep through the night, the advice is incredibly generic. It's very bland. There's nothing actionable from most of what they offer. And it's because they're so scared of offending somebody. And believe me, there are some really intense opinions out there and some really easily offended parents. But what we find is a ton of our parents are just like, thank you. I needed someone to help me rather than just try and placate me and make me feel like I'm the best parent in the world just because I exist. I actually need help. And so having a little bit of sharp elbows, meaning a sharply defined opinion, has been incredibly helpful for our parents. And we're really proud of that.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to preface, my next segment into this is, having a sharp elbow in building a business is the only way you can go and succeed. But every success, there's a dichotomy of a little bit of failure along the way too. You guys are both really smart individuals. You guys came together and now you've launched last Q4. You're starting to ship thousands of products. And I use this quote a lot in entrepreneurship that you've never been in entrepreneurship or built a company large enough unless you've sat in the dark with your hands on your head wondering what the fuck to do next, right?
Amen.
Well, what was that moment for you guys?
I've got my own. Charlie, do you want to share one from your side?
I think I know what yours is, so I'm going to steer away from that one.
Okay.
And I'll stick with product challenges. I think honestly, the launch was very challenging. So we launched in September in mass. In June, July, we sent out, 100, 200?
100 devices.
They weren't even like the mass production devices. These were just prototypes out to first customers. And I'll tell you, launch was very challenging. So, we had been running this inside of our homes for months and with our own families, multiple cameras, multiple monitors. And then when you deploy, you just hit various customer networks that are extremely challenging. And then just long running tests in other people's homes, you start hitting things like firmware bugs and other glitches, right? Other kinks. And I will say that our initial customer base was probably just like the best customers. Very forgiving, very understanding. Also, like the product did things already out the gate that other products simply didn't do. And so there was kind of that like, well, what's my alternative? This to go back to something much worse. So, but I will say, like, we actually had we flew everybody into Dallas. This includes folks from Latin America, because I have Latin American contractors on the dev team. So we're half based in the US, half based in Latin America. We flew those folks in just to, have some camaraderie at the launch. And second day we stopped, right? We said, time out. We're not doing any more like talking about OKRs or roadmap. We are triaging at this point because we were receiving so many customer tickets. And as I look at it now, it was not that many issues, right? It was kind of like the same things with a few customers, but it was one of those like, man, stop, all hands on deck, war room.
Kevin, what was that for you?
I would just say in general, and I can share like a couple specific moments, but the fundraise process over the last 2 years has been a very demoralizing and difficult experience, because to build something like Harbor costs an enormous amount of money, because you have so much product development. There's a lot of engineering time that's needed, both in-house, out-of-house expertise. You've got to work with your manufacturers. It's really expensive to launch a physical product. And, my experience in building Mizzen and Main was I never bothered with venture capital. I had one call with one well-known VC in the consumer space. And we were of a decent size, and we were raising a round that ultimately L. Catterton, a private equity firm, ended up coming in for a growth round. But when I was talking to her, and I won't name names, but she goes, I don't see how you 10x your revenue in the next 12 months. It's like, well, yeah, like that doesn't happen in physical product world. And look, I think that's why some of the DTC darlings that you saw capture a lot of attention. They captured the mind of one of the partners in these VC firms, and they shouldn't have raised venture capital, because that's not the model of what this is, of what VC-like returns can end up being. And so with Harbor, you can't build something like this without raising a lot of money up front. And our vision is not just a baby monitor. We have a much, much, much more expansive vision. And it does incorporate AI, but it's not just slapping an AI label on just so we can capture the AI hoopla. But, specifically going through this process, we got the pre-seed round going. That was great. We had a commitment in the seed round from our lead VC. And then it was, okay, let's go out and get some other firms to join the round. And I would broadly categorize it as just a very humbling and at times incredibly infuriating experience. So one great example, one of the blue chip names in consumer venture capital, I got introduced to them, and we started the call. It was a warm introduction. So I'm rarely cold outreaching. It's a warm introduction. And she goes, look, I'm a new mom. I hate my baby monitor. I get the product. I get the opportunity. I get the market size. Let's talk specifics. I want to hear how you're going to execute, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And amazing call. She couldn't have been more enthusiastic. We sent her a product. And not only did she not set it up, she never connected it to the internet. She never responded to another email again. And the call couldn't have gone any better. And if she had said anything on the call to say actually, I'm not that excited about this. It was, I can't wait to try the product, and I'm talking with the rest of the investment committee on Monday. Never connected the product, never answered another email, and just disappeared.
Let's give her a shout out here today. There you go.
Yeah, shout out. Thanks. Hey, I hope you're doing well. Maybe connect the product and try it out. And it's just there are versions of that happened again and again and again. And I will say, I'll give one very positive shout out. I pitched Founder Collective, had a great intro, had a great pitch, and they came back to me 3 days later and said, hey, we love to be proved wrong. We are rooting for you. We don't think that this is going to work. And I mean, I will remember Founder Collective for the rest of my life as an entrepreneur. I will give them all the shout out and praise in the world, because they were incredibly respectful through the process, and they had a concrete no in a timely manner. And not getting no's was so much more difficult than people just telling me they didn't like it or it wasn't going to work. It was that sort of chasing the vapor of the somewhat enthusiastic meetings that you get, because you're just sort of chasing the next meeting, chasing the next meeting, chasing the next meeting. And that led to a point where we had very little capital left, because we were waiting for another commitment to join. And we sort of started ringing the alarm bell of, if something doesn't close quick, we're not going to make it. And a very long story short there, it ended up that a couple family offices through my network here in Dallas stepped up in a big way. And then another VC that had been previously a small investor, Morrison Seeger here in Dallas, ended up stepping up in a huge way as well. And so it really was back up against the wall, Charlie and I kind of going, well, we're not sure that we're going to make it. And very specifically from a timing perspective, and I can say it now because we're far enough away, it was right before we started shipping the mass production product. And so this this sense of, I don't want to say injustice because there is real injustice in the world, but this sense of we didn't even get a chance. Like people don't even really have the product yet and we may not make it. That was a very, very low point. Just emotionally, we'd spent almost 2 years and then to go, we haven't even gotten to start running the race and we may not get the chance to. That was a very dark summer for a whole host of reasons, but hopefully some real talk that's helpful for your listeners.
Yeah, I think that's massive. And, one thing I want to, underscore there, and it may bring a little bit of a emotional trauma, because I'm sure you've thought about this, Kevin, is when you're raising VCP, when your back is against the wall, you have to understand, set thresholds to what your valuation is and how much money you actually need, and make sure you're not diluting yourself way too much. Yeah, I'm sure where times were tough and you were low on cash and people were poking holes in valuations, how did you stand your ground when raising capital to get enough money that you needed to fulfill the mass orders and keep the business going while maintaining valuation and not diluting both Charlie and Kevin?
For better or for worse, it really never was an argument or a challenge around valuation. It was literally just not getting people to answer an email after they said they loved everything and couldn't wait to talk after their IC meeting. So, thankfully we didn't have to wrestle with that too much because we had plenty of other things to wrestle with. I would say, ultimately we'd spent so long building the product, and importantly, one of the values that we talk about internally is we drink our own champagne, we eat our own dog food. We have used the product as a team for a long time. And we had a few beta testers. We knew that it worked. It wasn't as if we were betting, will this or won't this work? It was, we just need to get it in people's hands. And so I think that conviction that Charlie was able to give all of us and his team, that this thing works. We just have to get there. And then the second thing was, at this fundraising wall that we hit, and this is very real talk, I called a dozen people, most of whom I didn't expect to invest. It wasn't, hey, this is a last ditch fundraising effort. It was, I'm at the point where I got to throw every Hail Mary possible from a connection perspective. Do you know anyone that would be interested in investing? And importantly, the second piece of this was, we needed to raise a pretty substantial amount to finish our round, such that if we raised 40% of it, all of it would be worthless. We had to raise all of it or we had to walk away. Because if we raised less than nearly all of it, we wouldn't get to be able to pay for the product, to ship it, to, get across the actual starting line, as it were, not the finish line, but the starting line. And so I was just very transparent with people about where we were, about what we had on the line, the sacrifices that our team and Charlie and I had made, and just kind of laid it all out there. And a couple people that I had those conversations with ended up saying, you know what? I believe in you and I believe that you guys are going to make this work. Count me in. And when I called them, I wasn't asking for them to invest. It was I have to tell everybody who might be able to connect me with somebody, and some good thing will happen. And to Charlie's very kind words at the beginning, I don't do that often, but doing it in a way with a very high level of transparency and integrity across building Mezzanine Main and Harbor has helped. And one of those very specific tactics is Charlie and I have written an investor update email every week for 2.5 years. So every weekend, we write a recap of what's happening in each of the areas of the company, how much cash we have on hand, who we're talking to from an investor, a debt, a celebrity, a press perspective, and what our investors could do to help us in that week or month. And so the level of transparency and integrity that we've been able to operate with, I think, has bought us a lot of goodwill, not in an exploitative way, in just there's a higher level of trust. And also all along the way, our existing investors are like, I appreciate that. And I think that has helped when new investors have considered coming in.
Yeah, that level of transparency and communication is massive. Every 2 weeks is a bit audacious, make me look bad over here because I'm not doing every 2 weeks.
Every week.
Every week. Yeah, that's tough. You have a lot of emotional resilience, I would say, Kevin, both Kevin and Charlie here. And you sit in the CEO seat, a question I like to always ask. You've been a CEO for a large company doing $60 million in revenue in Mezzanine Main. And now, you're building a startup where you could have just sailed in the sunset and said, I don't need to go do another business again. But you decided to come over here and do this. Define what a good CEO is today? And how would you parlay that to the audience?
So a startup CEO is so fundamentally different than, even a mid-sized company. And of course, running services business with frontline employees versus, people who all sit behind a desk with knowledge workers. There's a lot of different versions of it. The most important lesson that I learned from, I would say, I think the most important CEO lesson I learned was from John Owsley. He's an MD at Catterton, a great supporter. He was the one who wrote the check into Mizzen and Main. Is you are not a family as a company. There was a period in time where I felt like we were all a family and we worked together. And my wife and I actually built Mizzen and Main together. He reframed it for me, which is you're a head coach. And the success of a head coach is about certainly defining the culture and holding people accountable, but it's really about finding the best offensive, defensive, and special teams coordinators, and then finding the right person who runs the back office, right? If you think about Saban was not coordinating with the charter jet company to get the team to their next game. He has never talked to that that type of company or vendor. Maybe very early days in his career, he might have, but his job is to set the culture and then to find the leaders and empower them to create excellence. And occasionally he will talk to the quarterback in the game, but mostly he has done the work ahead of time with the quarterback for the level of execution that's necessary. And so that is really important. And I think that I've done a much better job of that the second time around building Harbor than Mizzen and Main. I got it wrong a fair bit in the early days of Mizzen. And then, I think the second thing is having worked with an executive coach at Mizzen and Main, facing reality on a consistent basis. It's very easy when things are not going well to put your head in the sand and not want to face your bank balance, the tough conversations with your employees, or whatever. And facing reality on a daily basis, confronting it head on, being very comfortable having the uncomfortable and difficult conversations. It's a lot easier the second time around. I'll say publicly, because sometimes I get these questions and I think it's helpful to clarify. We have not sold Mizzen and Main. I'm still all in on the success of that company. We've raised some outside capital and the company's doing very well. But part of my drive and desire to build again is I want to go build something even bigger and even better that's going to impact even more people's lives. I can't imagine sailing off into the sunset, even if we had sold Mizzen and Main. The fact that I get to build with great partners like Charlie and great team members, and then the feedback we're getting from parents is we're changing their lives. I mean, truly, genuinely changing their lives. I'm proud of what we built with Mizzen and Main. I can say we changed guys' lives because they don't show sweat anymore and they don't have to iron their shirts. But getting to build again is a real privilege.
Charlie, if you had to define Kevin in one sentence, how would you do so?
I think you nailed it, which is resilience. So both Kevin and my previous CEO at the startup that I was at before I was acquired and then moved to Harbor, Felicity, they just have this intense resilience. They know it's going to work. Just steadfast. They're a rock, right? The water moves around them. And when I was interviewing Ryan, who is now I believe, president of Mizzen and Main,
CEO of Mizzen, yeah,
who Kevin essentially hired to replace him as CEO. A long story there, but it's now Ryan. And I was asked, because when Kevin was pitching the idea of Harbor, I asked Ryan, I was like, I don't understand that mindset that Kevin and Felicity had of an idea that I created. I know it's going to work. And so I asked Ryan, he has this super high level of conviction. He seems super determined to go do this. Do you think he would be successful? His answer was, well, some startups fail, but Kevin will not. Right? That he will achieve it. And so it's just something I've always admired.
Kevin, what would you say for Charlie?
I'll lead in with when I had this crazy idea for Harbor, and I've thought about it for years and years and years. One of my very best friends, his name is Mike. He sold his company to RealPage, and Mike sat alongside Charlie in leadership roles at RealPage, a very, very large company. And Mike said, the person that you're looking for to build this company with is Charlie. It's literally a perfect skill set. And then most importantly, I've never seen anyone command the level of loyalty and respect amongst developers that Charlie has, because my buddy Mike's worked with developers for 15, 20 years. And, I've seen that bear fruit in our first 4 hires, all used to work for Charlie, because they said, whatever you're doing, I want to come do it again. And most of our team, from a headcount perspective, reports into Charlie. And what I have been able to see is they will run through a brick wall for Charlie in service of our mission, but mostly because of their relationship with Charlie and how he treats the team in communication and respect and trust. And, I've heard plenty of cliches along the way, but like startups move at the speed of trust. And that is really important from a team perspective. It's also a very different experience from when I started Mizzen in Maine. I'd never hired anybody before. I'd never really done this. And when starting Harbor, like we've only hired excellence. And it's been really awesome because we move so fast. There is no checking in on people's work. There is no, I need some reporting from you to make sure that you are making progress. And then I'll follow that up with, I had some people ask me recently about, choosing co-founders, and Charlie and I met, and it's like that scene from Step Brothers where it's just like, did we just become best friends? It was very quick that we thought, you know what, this is going to be a good partnership. And we have built this company remotely. I think the number of hours that Charlie and I have spent in person, we're talking hundreds of hours total in person at max. And that's because we went on a trip to Asia. And so, at the end of the day, what we've been able to do is very unique, and it wouldn't be possible without the sense of resilience and loyalty and leadership that Charlie is able to exhibit on a consistent basis.
Yeah, it's like that famous quote, when you meet your wife, it's like, when you know, right? And there's no really definition around that. It's just a gut feeling check. And, I felt that about my partner as well. And, I went down the journey of entrepreneurship by myself for the last 10 years, built companies, sold companies. And then I finally had a partner over the last year and a half. And it's life changing to go have a sounding board and another opinion and someone who could add a lot of value. I look at that as the shining light in you that you never thought that you had. And that's what a partnership really is.
I think we knew that it would be a good partnership from the start, but for other folks that are listening to this, potential founders, we did go through a process still. So we did vet each other. I spoke with Ron, spoke with Felicity, who was my previous CEO, spoke to previous investors who had invested in each of our companies. We spent time with each other, kind of poked each other on like, where is your mind on in terms of like company culture? What will that look like? So there was a process that we followed, even though we kind of knew we're like, this feels really good, but we need to make sure.
Guys, I have this formula I like to always use. I'm not gonna share what my formula is because I want to hear yours. But let's just say it's X plus Y equals Z. And let's say Z is the outcome that we're all solving for. And we all try to build a business to get some sort of outcome. But let's call Z the uncontrollable variable, right? Because we can't control selling it for $1 billion today. But there are 2 controlled variables before that, which is the X and Y. How would you guys define what those controllable variables are?
That is a fascinating question. So I'll say I would love to think on this and see what more I could come up with. But my knee-jerk reaction here is what I think is most important in creating a company, a product, and something that customers want. And so it's value creation for customers and doing the right thing. And when you do those 2 things, the probability of success is just dramatically higher. There are so many other factors at play. But if you genuinely create value for your customers and you do things the right way, how you work with investors, how you work with teams, how you work with vendors, how you handle difficult moments, all of those things, the probability of that, wonderful outcome is, I think, just dramatically higher. I really love that question, and we'll spend more time thinking about that.
My rationale for asking this is that we live in a world of Generation Zs, younger generations who are listening to this pod today. who want a moonshot by buying a crypto token that can get into a 1,000x return. And when people always ask like, hey, how can I start making $100K a month? How do I get to that $1 million? And only solely focusing on the outcome rather than focusing on the control variables, right? And I think in life, we're always trying to solve for two things. And mine, I'll share what mine is. It's aligning the highest skill set of people with the best opportunity to yield the best outcome, right? Because those are two controlled variables that if I stole everyone from Elon's company at Tesla, I don't know, we'll build another EV company in a different market, whatever it may be, or SpaceX, another space company. And I get the best people in class for a very unique opportunity. I promise you, we don't need to worry about the outcome because the outcome will yield very good results. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that today because there's so much optionality that you can jump from and yield these instant results where you guys have both built companies over the long haul and showed that there's a lot of resilience to be had. There's a lot of patience, a lot of grit, and the money is made in the hold. And understanding who the people you want to go on the journey on is more important to how you will get there. And I think you guys are great examples of that. Where can people find more about Harbor and yourselves?
Yeah. So, I mean, I love to just make sure to hit our goal is to help create happier parents and healthier families. And the way that we do that is helping them get more sleep. And so they don't have to be customers of ours. We've got a ton of free resources at harbor.co. We've got sleep guides. We've got sleep guides for infants. We've got interviews with doctors and sleep experts and nursing experts. And all of that is available on our website, harbor.co. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, or X and Instagram. At Kevin S. Lavelle. And I don't know what my LinkedIn is, but you can find me there. And Charlie's on LinkedIn as well. Not a big X guy, but we're around. And if we can be helpful to folks, feel free to tag us on LinkedIn. And Charlie's got a wealth of knowledge and resources on the product development side. And we love to try and help share both of our experiences to help other entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
I love it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.